One of the biggest challenges that comes when you're doing the business side of an MSP, specifically when you're quoting and selling, is making sure, quoting and invoicing is making sure your taxes are set up properly. There are some platforms that will do automatic tax calculation based off of the address that the quote is for. Accounting packages like QuickBooks and Xero actually now also brought in automatic sales tax calculation. And this is really more of an issue mostly for the United States. As far as I know, like I don't really know anything about the Canadian side or outside of the United States, but from what I understand, the United States has it pretty bad with various different rates that exist across different counties, zip codes, and so on. Halo doesn't have a way to do automatic tax calculation unless you tie it into a third-party integration. They don't have Avalara integration right now. It's something that's being worked on that's going to be coming. But Avalara itself is a pretty expensive subscription, and it does require you to have that subscription in order for it to work. QuickBooks Online does do automatic sales tax calculation now, what they call AST. And Halo can hook into it, although I'm not completely sure on how well it works because I don't have a lot of hands-on experience with that. I personally use Xero. With all that being said, there are some options that we can use. Ideally, I wanted to do something where I would build the automatic tax assignment. It's not necessarily a tax calculation. And we're going to dig into what the nuances are between that in a moment. But ideally, I want to do this natively inside of Halo using Halo's custom integration module. Unfortunately, I've mentioned a few times in the past that the custom integration module is a bit limited in what it can do. And so we really can't use it in this case. But what I am going to do is I'm going to create a workflow in Roost, which I haven't done a video on Roost in a while. I have been thinking about this idea for a long time. I started trying to create the tax integration inside the custom integration in Halo. So I'm going to show you what I've done, what that looks like. But we're actually just going to recreate this in Roost to a certain extent. And we're going to have to break it down in some stages. There may be multiple parts of this video, depending on how long it goes. But there's a couple of things that we're going to try to achieve. We're going to do, number one, is we have to collect the available tax rates from the clients based off zip code. And number two is we need to make sure that we associate the tax rate to the client once that's done. The easiest way to do this is going to be by running through when the client gets created. Basically, we fire off a request that says, "Hey, new client was created. Look up the tax rate and then apply the tax rate to that new client that was created." So that's the general idea of what we're going to do. And we'll explore how this plays out in real time with me live, because I don't know why I'm doing this, but we're going to do it together. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And this is the screen I have Roost open on. We also have, let me just move it over here. Okay, so we've got Roost open on, and we've got Halo open, the configuration, and we also have this website. And I'm going to show you this website here. It's free for 100 requests per month. If you're not onboarding more than 100 clients a month, then you don't need to pay anything to use this platform. If you're doing more than 100, if you're doing like maybe 1,000, you got to pay $5 a month. This is a fairly low cost, and again, there's a reason for this. We'll talk about that in a moment. This is a fairly low cost platform to do tax calculation. So I'm going to look up 21133, for example, and we'll come back as Baltimore, Maryland, showing you the tax is 6%. If I do 11210 and look that up, it's going to come back as Brooklyn, 8.875%. And we'll dig into what this looks like on the API side. There is an integration that we can tie into and some examples on how to do that integration call. And you can see the response comes back with the name of the tax, the country, the state, the county, the city, the message, whether it was successful or not, the total rate, the rate percentage, the rate sign, and so on. In the event there's something from the state or county, it combines all of it together, and then it comes back out with the total percentage that we need to do. So it builds the composite tax for you, and it just gives you that total tax amount that applies based off of the zip code. So why is this cheaper than Avalara? There's a difference between how an Avalara integration would work and how this system would work. The key difference is that we are not doing a tax lookup on every single new quote. We're not doing a tax lookup on every new invoice. We're not doing a tax lookup on every new sales order. All we're doing is we're doing a lookup at the time of creating a client, and then we're creating a rate inside of Halo that matches that, and we're setting the client to that rate. That's basically it. There are some things that we may have to adjust or change as part of this, and we'll talk about that as we go through the build up. Just some things that I'm already thinking of is like we need the rate to map back to a rate in your accounting package. So we'll have to figure that out. We'll go through this and see what it looks like. The other things that may come up is like the tax law state that the tax applied to hardware is based off the delivery address, not necessarily the address of the client, right? It's not about who's buying it, it's about where the hardware is going. And so if you're shipping it to somewhere other than the client's address, the tax rate under the client may not be helpful at that point, right? So we may have to figure something out with that, with Halo or whatever. Whereas the difference with Avalara is that it would do a lookup each and every time. So that's always going to have the most accurate tax rate for where it's going. With that being said, Avalara itself is generally just more expensive. So that's another reason why it's cheaper to use taxrate.io. You're doing less lookups, and it's just in general a cheaper platform. We don't have a method of doing or copying the lookup per quote, really. I guess theoretically, again, we'll save that for another time. I'm already distracting myself by potentially thinking how we can work that out. For right now, let's just dive right into Halo, and I'll show you what we've started building already. We're going to go to integrations, and we're going to scroll down to custom integrations, and we are going to go into our runbooks, and let's look at our automatic tax rate assignment runbook. Okay, so the way this works, due to a bug in Halo, if you are going to be running a runbook, custom integration runbook, from anything other than a ticket event, you will not be able to get or receive the actual variables or parameters of that entity. It'll just be blank. The webhook will fire, like the event will fire, but you won't be able to reference any of the values of the properties of what fired. You won't see the body or anything like that. The workaround for this is to set up the runbook to be started from Halo and from a public endpoint, and then take this URL and then register a webhook in Halo separately that'll allow you to pass in the parameters that you want. So in here, you go to webhooks, and notice I've got a few things here, and we're just going to go to new client trigger tax lookup, and it'll fire off that webhook. And you can see I'm passing in the area ID as client ID, and on the runbook itself, I'm importing the client ID as CID, and that's being pulled from the request content client ID. Let's look at the flow chart itself. Okay, so I've created a method inside of Halo's API where I'm going to get the client details. So if we look at this method, I'm going to grab the API, I'm going to pull up the client ID, and I'm going to output specifically the main site ID of the client. Now, this doesn't work if there's more than one site and there's different taxes because they're in different locations. So we got to account for that also in some way, shape, or form. But for right now, we're just starting off. I'm grabbing the main site ID, and we're going to cancel that. And let's go further on to the next step. Once we have that site ID, I am going to pull those site information. I'm going to get site details. I'm passing in the site ID, and I'm going to output the zip code and the delivery address and the email domain. Again, I only care about the zip code in this case. So I'm going to pull out that zip code. Upon that happening, I'm going to go to taxrate.io at this point. I'm going to get the rate by zip code. So I'm going to edit this method, and I can see I'm passing in the zip code into the query here. And I'm just going to go ahead and test it. And I can pass in 20133 and save, and I get a response back. There we go. And the tax rate, the found API rate is 6%. right? Where we can see that the rate sign is 6%, the PCT is 0.06, and the rate is 6. If I come back and set instead 11210 and do a save, we'll come back and we'll get a rate of 8.875. Okay, so you can see this is already kind of working and how it's going to play out. I'm basically getting the tax rate based off of the zip code of the client, and I'm going to go from there and say, now that I have the tax rate, I am going to find the rates in Halo. And so now I need to go find the relevant rates inside of Halo. So I'm using the Halo's API. If I just test this real quick, it's going to come back with a response of all the rates that exist and all their percentages. I specifically need to find one rate. I need to find the ID number of the rate matching the percentage of the return zip code. The problem is, this is where we start running into limitations, I don't have a way of doing that without going through some ridiculously complicated array loops inside of the workflow within this runbook. And I don't want to do that. Ideally, I'd be able to pass value equals and then the variable of the rate, but I can't. I have to hard code it. It doesn't accept variables right now. That is something that's going to be changing, and then it'll allow us to filter the data out to the specific ID that we need. But for right now, I basically ran into a wall in terms of what I can do here. So we're going to take this and I'm going to say, well, let's go back to Roost, my favorite RPA, and we're just going to build a HaloPSA tax rate assignment. And we're just going to say this is a demo, Mendy created demo. We're going to pull that demo out. And we're going to say it's a proof of concept and submit. Okay, and let's start off our workflow. So we know that we start with a noop in all cases. We're just going to say this is a start here. And we're going to get through all of these things. So we're getting the client ID. The site ID is going to be passed into us. We need to pull the site ID from the client, which we're doing by reading. Let's go back here. We're reading the body, the output variables. We're going to read the main site ID out of that. We're going to do a lookup on the client, and we're going to be pulling out the main site ID. So we're going to come back here, and we're going to say, first thing we want to do is we want to get, I'm going to do a generic request to Halo. Yeah, I'm going to generic request to Halo, and let's label this to say get client. And we're going to copy basically what we have. I can close this out. I don't need this anymore. I'm going to move it to the back. Okay, here, this is what I want. I'm going to grab this client CID, and I'm going to put that URL right here. So that is client CID, and I'm going to change CID to be the variable of what we want, client ID. Okay, and so now we should be getting back the client ID at this point. For fun, so that we can test this, I'm going to put a input configuration where we have client ID, and I will just submit that for right now, and we will move on. Once we have that client, we want to grab the output of that client, and we can see that output is going to be based off of the main site ID, which is a part of the response that comes in. So we're going to grab this, and we're going to say main site ID, and that's going to be the variable we're going to create, and it's going to read it from tasks.getClient.result.main site ID, give or take. All right, and so we can already start to test this. I'm going to publish and test, and we're going to grab an ID number. The ID number that we used to run this last, I'm just going to grab that, was 93. So I'm just going to provide it ID number 93 and test. And we have a client that came back, and let's look at our, I'm just going to pull it up in here and see if we have a context value of main site ID is 169. So that's already working. Let's go ahead and close this out. We can close that out, and let's do our next thing that we want to achieve, right? So we have this working. We're going to grab the next step, which is to pull the site details. So we're going to edit this method, and we're going to run this command, and we're just going to do another generic action. And you can kind of see how I'm just recreating in Roost the original flow that I had in Halo. And so here we'll do get site details, and I can I'm not going to rename it because I have a variable depending on it, and that's just going to be messy for no reason. So we'll just paste this in here. We'll pull, come back. We'll pull this out and we'll replace this with ctx.mainSiteID and close that. Okay. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to grab the output of that, and we want to provide the site zip code, which is literally just delivery address.postcode. So we're going to come in here and we're going to put zip code, and we're going to say this is tasks dot get site details dot result dot delivery address dot postcode, and remove that exclamation point and close. All right. And so if I publish this and test it again, do you remember my site ID that we were testing with? Who knows? Let's go back into our results and rerun this result. So we will just, 93 was the client ID. We're just going to rerun this. And now we should get a client. It should come back, and a site should come back. And if we expand our context values that we have saved, we can see that our zip code is 10168. We're making some progress here. Now that we have the zip code, the next thing we need to do is just recreate the tax lookup. Okay. This is where things may get a little funny. You're going to see my API key probably. Actually, you know what? You may not. I don't remember what's there. But if you see my API key, don't worry about it. I'm going to be changing it anyways if it is getting leaked. There is a public API key that is very restricted, so you can use it for testing, but it's basically gets used upon searching, and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or something like that. So let's find out. We don't want this one. We want the one before that one, and we're going to recreate this. So we'll go to edit method. We've got the API v1 here. Our authorization is occurring inside of the thing, so I guess you won't see my API key right now. Let's go ahead and make this work. We're going to grab this URL, and we are going to go to here, and we're going to do a generic HTTP request at this point. Okay, and we're just going to link them across, and we're going to say our name of this is lookup tax rate. Okay, and we're going to do a get the URL. We want the full URL in here, and we're going to grab that from here. Okay, and then we want to pass in the zip code as a query parameter. So we want to come in here and say zip equals, and then we want the ctx.zip code included. Yep, that's basically how it's going to look. Now, we also need to pass in our API key. So we're going to go to taxrate.io, and I'm just going to scroll down here and take a look at node, I think. Here we go. Boom. There's an API key that should work, I think. We'll find out. I think it's very limited, and so we can use that. And I think it was just literally as a API key equals, right? So we'll just come in here and we'll say API underscore key equals paste and zip equals close. And then from the rate perspective, we don't even know exactly what we want. I'm just going to save this entire thing as rate found or rates or something like that and publish and submit. Okay. And now basically in about 15 minutes or so, maybe less than 15 minutes or so, we've recreated where we were on the Halo runbook inside of Roost. We should be able to see the rates that we got back. So if I refresh this and open this up, I have a rates value, and we got authorization required. So that did not work. Let's go take a look at where I'm using this. I thought API underscore key equals generate zip by zip question mark API key. Yeah, okay, so maybe the API key doesn't work. I thought I had tested it and it does work, but I could be mistaken. Let's go take a look at our custom integrations and see what I'm doing there. Taxrate.io, API key is here, right? So That's just included in the query parameters, API underscore key. Got it. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to pull this out of the screen share and grab that code. Bum, 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 if I can find where to do it. There we go. Okay, so let's come here and we're going to say our API key is actually that. And close and publish and submit and rerun. We want to see if this works. Okay, so we'll refresh and let's take a look. We got our rates and our rate is success. And we can see that our status bid is 200. Rate has been generated. New York County, state New York. So city, New York, county, New York, state, New York, country, US, tax name is sales tax, rate is 8.875, and the rate PCT is 0.0875, and so on. So now what we want to do is, first of all, if we notice, the value is inside of data that's coming back, and this looks like a JSON string. It's not even properly parsed for some reason. So we want to dig into this. Let's go pull this up in a context editor and see if we can look at it. So we do ctx.rates. We've got the data. So if I do .data, now we have a string. If I do JSON parse, there we go. Now I've got a JSON object. All right, so I'm just going to take this and I'm going to move our rates out of here and into here. So we'll do data alias, and we're just going to say this is for tasks dot lookup tax rate dot result dot data JSON parse, and that'll be the rates that we come back with, and we can move forward with that. Now we can say this is dependent on the condition of, if we go back and look at our agenda again and just back out of the rates, we can say status code, and that'll give 200, and we can say equals 200 at that point, which would be a true. So we're just going to copy this, and we'll go back here to say tasks dot lookup tax rate dot result dot paste equals 200. And so now that's basically saying if this succeeds, and we can just throw a check mark on here and say success, right? So if this is a success, it'll go down here and grab the rates. Otherwise, for all other conditions, we can just error out at this point, and we can feel free to override this. Actually, we don't need to. Always is fine. Let's go and set this to follow first. And so now if it goes here, it will go and do stuff with Halo. We're going to come here and name this do stuff with Halo. Do Halo things. And we can set another one for an end here, which we will jump straight to the end. Right here. All right, and so now we kind of keep things pretty clear, pretty neat, all in a row. We can publish this. We've got our rate set. If I go ahead and rerun this flow, we should be able to start creating a clear distinction of exactly what our rates are that we have to follow. Boom, City, New York, 8.875, and so on and so forth. So what we now need to do is we need to come back, and here's my usage data. My quote is 100 for a month. I've used 10 already, and I'm using 10%, right? So now that we've done that, we want to now say, okay, we need a tax rate associated with this thing. So we need to do a couple things. Number one is we need to make sure that if it changes, we can update it easily. And we don't want to have to go back and change it across all the clients, right? Our idea is that we need to create a rate inside of Halo. So if we're done in this tax rate IO custom, like we're basically pulled everything out of the custom integrations at this point, and it's all inside of Roost. So we don't need this screen anymore. If I go look at my tax rates, I can see that I've got a couple tax rates here for Maryland or whatever, but I don't really have a rate that's for New York. So I need to create a rate here. And then I also have to set that rate on the client level. So here's what we're going to do. First, we need to make the rate inside of Halo. First, I need to know if the rate even exists, right? So we know that there's a generic API call for rates. I'm actually going to put this up here. We're going to go up here. We're going to grab another HTTP Halo call, and I'm going to say pull existing rates. Okay, and we're going to move this and say come here for this. I lied when I said earlier we were done with the custom integration. There's one more thing we need to do, and that is to verify what that method was inside of Halo for. I can't filter on this column. That is annoying. Wow. Custom integrations, Halo methods, and from here we can find retrieve RD. No, good. That's just there we go. Find rate by percent. Perfect. And that's just pulling the API /tax. So we can just go here and say this is going to be tax. And we're just going to pull a list of those tax rates that are returned. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we don't have anything specific. We're just looking directly on the response. So we're just going to save this as Halo rates for right now. And then we will publish that and move forward. So now we've got Halo rates, we've got client information, and we can try to space this out so it gets more in line with how this is all going to work. Because there's two transitions here, so this arrow needs a little bit more room. And we can bring that back down here and again, just publish. And let's rerun and see what we get. Okay. All right, so we've got the start place. We pulled our existing rates. Let's go take a look at what that looks like. If we open this up and refresh, we should get a list of our context options. Our second one should include our Halo rates. Notice it's a list, and we come back with all the rates that we have, including the QBO tax information, if there is one, and then which I don't use QBO, so that's actually not even going to be used. We've got the zero information, and then we've got the different sales tax and whatnot, different codes that exist in Halo that came from zero when we did our original import. So going back to what I said, like we have the third party description is Maryland State, the value is 6. We need a way to find the rate if it exists in Halo already. So what we're going to do is we're going to use, we could use percentage, but it could be that there's two different places that end up on the same percentage. I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if it's likely or whether it actually exists, but potentially it is feasible for it to happen, especially tax rates change year by year, that we end up in two different places and they both have the same tax rate. Now, which one am I updating or changing? And that could have problems later on down the line. So ideally, what we want to do is identify it in the name, and we want to have that name coded in a way that makes it easy to automate later on. So if we're looking at our, let's do this. Let me close this Jinja Live Editor out and open up a new one. We're going to try to match the rates that we have. So we've got ctx.rates, I think. Maybe rates, perfect. And we also have ctx.halo rates, maybe. There we go. And now this is a list, and we have one object here that's not a list. And we want to basically say, well, let's do it by percentage first, right? So we have the percentage amount, which is based off of the rate PCT. Now the value, I think. Where are you? State, New York. Oh, rate is right here. So let's say CTX rates.rate potentially will give us 8.875, right? And now we want to find the rate here, and we're going to say rate for rate in, and so we're doing a list comprehension. If rate dot, and then we're looking at a specific one of these items, and I guess we're looking for value, I guess, rate dot value equals CTX rates.rate. And we should come back with nothing because we don't have any kind of rate that exists, right, with that level. Now, if we expand this and jump to, well, let's do that. Let me just change this to be 6. We come back with 1, right? So this is what it should look like if it matched. Now, because we can't match on that, this is going to be 0. What we really want to do is say, okay, the rate doesn't exist, but okay, sorry, I'm getting off track. I'm getting ahead of myself. We want to do something other than rate, and the best way to do it would be based off name. So if I come back here and do ctx.rate rates, we can see that there is a country, there's a county, there's a city, there's a tax name, right? So we can start taking this and building a string that we're going to use. So imagine we did something like ctx.rates.city, or let's do county first, right? County, New York City County, and then we're going to combine that with a hyphen, maybe a space, hyphen space, ctx.rates.city. Okay, and then we can combine that with a state potentially. So we'll do, and then ctx.rates. What was it? Anyone remember? State, maybe? There you go. And then what is it that we're dealing with? So let's combine this with a pipe now that is, let's go back here and open up our rates. Sales tax name. Okay, so let's grab that. And we'll come in here and we'll say ctx.rates.tax name. And so now we have a name that we can use to label our new tax code, and we can search for it. So we're going to say, let's imagine that we did the following. Let's paste this in here so I don't lose it. Let's grab this out and let's go over to here and say, hey, we just looked up a tax code. We got a successful rate. What is the name of the rate that we're going to be looking for? So we're going to do rate name, and we're going to save that string as part of this rate underscore name. And let's publish that. Okay. And then we're going to say, we are going to then come around and say, does the name exist in here? So instead of doing ctx rates.rate, imagine we had ctx.rate name, or tax, what do we call it? Rate name, right? And this should be basically nothing because rate name doesn't exist right now. Yeah, rate name. We should get an error message saying rate name is undefined. But if I do that, I get back the same message. So now this is good enough for me to find, is there a rate that exists, and what rate is it? Okay, so we're going to come here and we're going to cut this out, and we're going to go back up here, and we're going to create one more variable that we're going to use in this transition, and it's going to basically be found rate paste. Okay. Now we've got halo rates, we've got rate value, ctx rate name. Okay, perfect. And then we are going to pipe this entire thing out to be, by default, it'll just be a empty list at this point. Now this should still work. Let me just make sure I didn't break that syntax real quick. Yeah, perfect. All right, so now I've got that. We're going to close and we're going to save this. And I'm just going to say in here, I'm going to do a condition. All right, condition number 1 is going to be, is ctx dot found rate greater than 0. Found rate, sorry, dot length, that's what I'm looking for, is greater than 0. Right? And if it is, it's going to go down this direction. And if it's not, we're going to go up here and say, equals 0. And so what we'll end up here is we will end it if it goes this direction. And if it is, we are going to, we're not going to end it actually. Let's undo that if I can. Perfect. So we're going to have two things that occur. Number one is if we found the rate, we are going to actually apply. And I'm going for the don't repeat yourself, the dry methodology here. So I'm trying to keep things in line so that they all collapse properly in the order that needs to happen. So here we'll do apply rate to client. And that'll be a generic API call that we're going to go to update the client at this point. Once that is applied, we can go ahead and end it. If a rate is found, right, we may have to do some additional logic to say, hey, it's been found. We want to go ahead and say, oh, if more than one has been found, we have to handle that. But if only one, if we have just one, we're just going to go ahead and apply that rate to the client. If we don't have any, we're going to say create the rate. We're going to say create Halo rate, let's say. And then we will go and apply that rate to here. So there's a couple things that we need to do, and you can kind of see how the structure is taking place now. We're going to, number one is we have to come here and say there's more than one way to get to this task. We only want one of them to have to succeed. We're going to update that to 1. We want this to only be one or the other. We don't need all of them to match, so that's going to be followed first. And then this is going to go through. If it matches, it'll hit here. If it matches here, it'll hit here. We have 2 ways for it to hit the end. So also this one needs to be met 1 path. We don't need all the paths to meet it. With that being said, we're going to go overhead and I'm going to rerun this, and we should see which direction it's going to flow. Okay, pardon the music. The lookup tax rate failed because it failed to succeed in 600 seconds, and then that caused a timeout to occur. Why did that fail? That doesn't make any sense. That was less than 5 minutes. That was 5.3 seconds. Interesting. Let's look at our lookup tax rate and go to down here. It's actually 5 seconds, not 300. So let's change this to 300 seconds. We can even be 30 seconds. Let's be nice. We don't need it to wait for 5 minutes. APIs most of the time have a timeout of 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and just try that again. All right, we're going to pull our existing tax rates from Halo, and we are going to do a bunch of stuff. And notice that we followed the flow correctly because we pulled the tax rate. Let's just expand our context variables and go through this. We're going to walk through this right now. So we have our Halo rates, which is great. We have our main site ID, perfect. We've got our site zip code, great. And then from there, we can see we've got a found rate, which is blank. The name that we're expecting to find is New York County, New York sales tax. The rates that we did find are here, right? And so because our found rate is 0, we are expecting to say, create the Halo rate, and then after that, apply the rate to the client. Now, if I were to copy this, for example, go into Halo here. Let's go back to our tax rates. This is one of the reasons, again, I always say this on all these calls, all these videos that I do. One of the reasons why I like Halo so much is because we can come in here and we can set this up. What was it, 8 point something? Let's go take a look at that, 8.875. 8.875. And we're going to manually put this in. Now, I'm not saving this yet, okay? I'm just going to inspect this item. And if I dock it, so you can see what I'm about to do, I'll dock it to the left. And we're going to just make that a little bit smaller. We're going to go to the network tab. And I'm just going to be capturing the network thing as I save this. I think I can get away without setting a 0 tenant. No, apparently I can't. So we'll go ahead and set one. And then I'm going to go ahead and save without setting a 0 tax rate. Now notice I have a tax post here. All I need to do is capture this payload. I'm going to grab the entire thing as raw, not as parsed. I'm going to grab the source. and I'm going to grab where I'm posting it to. I'm posting it to the API tax endpoint. I can stop the API capturing for right now. I don't need that to fill up. And then let's go back to Roost. Two things are going to happen. Number one is that I now know how to create the tax rate. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to replace this apply rate to Halo client with a generic call to create Halo rate. I'm actually in the wrong place. I'm going to replace this one with this one here. And I'm going to fix the E. Let's go ahead and do that. Cool. And then we'll set this up is going to be a post now, and it's going to go to tax. And our body is going to be basically what we copied out of Chrome, right? And so now we can just make this a little bit better. We're going to put this all wrapped inside of Jinja so that it actually gets processed as a array slash array of objects. And now we can, let's just put this broken out into an object that we can read easily. So we got the 0 tenant ID, we got the 0 rate, we got cash flow, tax rate. I don't know if we need all this stuff to create the rate. We're gonna try it without it and see how it goes. And we've got our exact tax code, my tax code, we've got our linked rates, it's gonna be blank, and our QBO tax rate and QBO tax code. And then we are going to close our object, close our array, and then finally close our JSON. Now, the thing to know about this is when we're doing, we basically just are repeating the API call that we made inside of Halo inside of Roost. So the only thing to know about this is notice that on the body over here, there's a string tab. That means that in order for this to work, I have to pass it as a string. I'm making this an object. It's not going to work. I have to append the JSON dump in order for it to be written out as a JSON string so that it can be passed in the body area without a problem. Next, I'm going to come around and I'm just going to replace some of these things. I don't need to have this in here because guess what? I have this as a variable. So I'm going to say this is the, I don't need to put in the curly braces. I'm already inside that. So I'm going to say this is the tax rate name, boom, like that. And then the value, I already know what that's going to be as well. I have that coming from ctx.rates.rate, I think it was. Then the only thing I don't have is a 0 tenant ID. I'll leave that alone for right now. And then everything else is good. I'm basically clear to go ahead and post this, and it should come back with a rate. So let's do created rate. We're going to save that. And I'm just going to, I'm going to do one more thing. Go to advanced and set this to be, no, I don't need to do that because it's only one way to get in. So I'm going to remove this. I'm going to drag this arrow up here instead. And I'm going to put this arrow back like that. And I'm just going to slot this back into play where it was before. And we're just going to delete this. This is not necessary at this point in time. Delete. Apparently I can't do that. There you go, delete task. And we're going to publish our changes. So one of two things should happen now. I already saved the tax rate. It's already here, right? So we don't have to worry about it being created. I should be able to run it again. And it should come back and say, hey, we already have the rate. It should show up as found. Let's go ahead and just apply the rate to the client. Apparently that did not work. Let's go find out why not. So we have in here our found rate is blank. Our rate name is still here. Let's go take a look at what I did wrong. If we expand our Jinja and we look at our ctx.halo rates, we should see a rate here that exists for the New York. Oh, because it's third-party description. Duh, that was dumb of me. It's actually not third-party description, it's name. But these are not name. Oh, that is name. What am I thinking? Okay. Yeah, name is what we're looking for. Perfect. So let's go back here and grab our logic that we're doing up here. And this is going to be wrong. Rate for rate if rate.name equals ctx rate name. Close. And we can actually just take this, run it, close this, come back here and rerun it here and verify, yep, we got one. And so now this should work. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and publish this. Now note that we got an error message. It did try to make the rate, but we got an error message. I wonder what that error message is. Forbidden. That's it. Forbidden. Cool. I don't know what that means, and we may have a problem creating the rates from Roost. We may have to grant additional privileges. But let's see if we can keep going. For right now, we're going to go ahead and rerun. So it'll pull existing rates. It'll go through, and notice it's doing Halo things, and it skips the creation and goes directly to applying rates to the client. And now if we refresh and expand our context variables, we should see that we have the context variable of a found rate. And so now that is coming back as 1, and we are going to move from there. Okay. Here's how this is going to work. At this point in time, we are going to create a client. That client's going to have a site. That site's going to have an address. That address is going to be sent to Roost. Or more specifically, a trigger is telling Roost that that was created. Roost is going to pull that address and that zip code and look up the rate. Then Roost is going to compare that rate to the existing Halo rates. And if it does exist, it's going to find it and apply the client, that rate to that new client. If the rate doesn't exist, ideally, Roost makes a new rate inside of Halo. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and test this out with it creating the rate again. The way we're going to do this is we're actually going to do a couple things. First, we're going to come up here and say, Halo things, we only want to do something if the length of the rate is equal to 1, not greater than 0. Okay? Equal to 1. Boom. And so now this will only error out or go on to the next one if the rates doesn't exist. If for some magic reason we also have any other condition that gets met, we're just going to end it directly and say just jump straight to the end. This is for all other errors that may happen. We may find more than one rate. We may find, I don't know what other conditions we can have. We'll either have a rate that exists where it's 1 or 0, or we'll have more than 1, right? So we can't have less than 0. That's not really a possibility. But if we happen to have more than one rate, we're just going to skip the whole process. We're not going to know what to do. We're going to leave that alone. And in the end process, we can add like an email to the person who ran it or something like that to say, hey, guess what? You need to go manually set a rate because there's something wrong with the rates that we have. We don't know which one to assign automatically. All right. So with that being said, we're going to go back to our rates, and now I'm going to delete it. Yes. And so now this rate no longer exists. And what should happen is if I republish this, just to be safe, I don't know how many times I do it, I'm going to rerun this workflow. And let's see, it should pull the existing rates. It should get the client, get the site details. And we still have a failure with creating the Halo rate. And it's because it's forbidden. Okay, so I don't know what I'm using to integrate Roost to Halo offhand. Let's go look at my integrations. HaloPSA. All right, this is my client ID. Let's go ahead and grab that. Let's go take a look at our integrations. I'm going to go to a new tab here. Integrations and API, and then we'll go to our view applications, and I'm just going to filter for this client ID. Here's Roost. All right, what do we have? It's logging in as me, so it's got my permissions, and it does not have admin permissions. So that's going to be the problem. So we're going to come up here, and I'm just going to grant it admin rights at this point. Save, and we may have to update Roost to say, I don't know. Do we have to update Roost? Who knows? Let's save it. Okay. And I guess try again. Who knows if this is going to work? No, I probably have to disconnect and reauthorize it. Let's do that real quick. I'm going to pull it out of the screen share because this is not a key I'm going to be screwing with after the video. And I'm just going to disconnect the application, reauthorize it with the new permissions. And then we will resume very shortly. Give me a moment. That's the wrong tab to pull out. Let's pull this one out. And this one we can give back to you so that you guys can see this again. This is not related. Okay, great. And we'll go to here. And I'm just going to change secret, save the configuration, authorization successful, refresh options. Okay, that's all technically working. Let's go back here and try again, I guess. Let's see what happens. Forbidden. Okay, well, I did say we were going to split the video up depending on how long it goes. And it seems like we may be going a while because it's not accepting the refresh, and I'm just like, I don't want to have to remove it and re-add it right now. I feel like that's going to be really annoying. Oh, whatever, I'll try it. Okay, let's add a configuration. Default, we will make this the default. We'll set the client secret. We'll grab the client ID again. And we will specify the host name. Okay. All right, who knows if this works? I don't. Let's try it again one more time before we give this up, and we will return to this as a part 2 video to finish up the remaining parts if this does not work. Boom. Created the Halo rate is successful. We would then go apply the rate. So now if I come back here, we can see that it was successfully created. And if we go to apply rate, that would be the next step. And then we would end. And so at this point, we've now accomplished the last part that I wanted to do before we ended the video. And we can see that rate is now created again, as we would expect. Okay, so in this version of the workflow, what would happen is, again, just to summarize, is clients created, client creation causes a webhook to fire. Webhook will fire off to Roost. And then upon that webhook firing, it's going to do a lookup of the zip code for the rate. It's going to check to see if the rate exists already in Halo. If it does, it's not going to create a new one. So we can literally rerun this again, and we should see that it'll come back and just skip the creation and automatically just apply the rate at that point. Because it's going to look up the rate by zip code, find the one to use from Halo, and then it's going to apply that to, oh, come on. Looks like there's a problem with DNS resolution. Great. Let's go try that again. There's always DNS, right? There we go. And so now it should find the tax rate from Halo, and it should just apply the rate directly. It doesn't need to create it again because it already exists at that point. So this is the flow that we're expecting to start creating or start using. And again, this is part 1 of the video. Part 2, we're going to come back and we're going to start building out some additional steps to happen. We're going to build out actually applying the rate to the client. We're going to build out, you know, how do we make sure we want to go through and actually update all of the existing rates that we have today. You know, and so that's going to be something that we're going to have to figure out ways and things that we can do, because the rates change year to year. And we don't want to have to go manually do that. Maybe there's something that we can do with taxrate.io to do all the lookups across all the rates that we have to verify what the new rates are at that point. Anyways, I hope this was interesting. I hope you learned something, and I hope you're looking forward to the next video, which should be coming out, I don't know, sometime in the next week or so to finish this up. Thanks for watching, and have a great rest of your night, or whatever time of day it is for you.